he had a good nap. His clothes were dry. He put them back on. And then he looked up at the forest that he had found. And it was a totally different kind of forest than the ones back home. Instead of oaks and maples, he looked around and all he could see were pine trees for as far as the eye could see. And it was much quieter. There was very few birds here. And instead of weeds and grass and the undergrowth and bushes, there was pine needles as far as the eye could see. Brown little pokey ones that smelled good, but made sure that there was no grass. And there was a lot of moss everywhere because he snuck underneath the pine trees and looked up and he couldn't see the sun anywhere because the woods were so thick. But there was still a deer trail, so he followed that. And he said, okay, I must be going the right place to find the lost fort in the canyon because I've passed 2 of the places that I was told I would find. So he wasn't really sure what a castle looked like, but this whole time as he climbed, he was heading uphill. Remember, the river was in a valley. So he climbed up the hill through this forest, up and up and up. And before, by dinner time, he was just tired. Like, it was a long climb, but he could see a very long ways away. He could see to the next mountain range. So he was standing on a mountain, and in the next valley over, through more woods, was this pyramid with this funny symbol on top. He couldn't really tell what it was. It was too far away. But it was a yellow stone pyramid. And he said, oh, that must be the castle, even though it's not like a normal shaped castle. Most castles are square or round. He said, all right, well, I'll head that direction, and if it's the castle of the dead giants, then I know my next stop will be the canyon. So it took several days of travel for him to get down the mountain. And at that time, he slept several times, but lots of lean-tos. But he stayed warm and safe with fires. And he ate pine bark, which wasn't very good, but it made him not starve. And he caught a couple birds that he was able to whack off branches with his sword. And he cooked them over the fire. And they weren't very good because they were small, but he stayed alive. Before you know it, he came upon the castle. And the closer he got, the more he realized it wasn't medium-sized like he thought. It was huge. He looked up at the entrance, which was also a triangle. And he knew that he could not, even his grandfather standing on top of another of his grandfathers and him on top of him, he could not reach the top. So it was over 20 feet. So he knew he did not want to go into that dark, long entrance door by himself without light. So he dug out the stub of the candle that he kept, and he lit it with his squint, and he held it up, and he went all the way through there. And every once in a while, he looked up. Sometimes the light's shadow would reach the ceiling, and he could see these holes. Now, his grandpa told him all about the castles that he stormed when he was in the war, the old war. And he knew that those were called murder holes so that the people of the castle could defend against invaders. But he didn't see anybody and he didn't hear anybody. And he was just coming to the end of the tunnel when he realized he should probably announce himself because it's very rude to sneak into someone's castle unannounced. So he said, hello! And instead of just waiting for a response, he could hear his voice echo and go, hello, 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 hello. So he knew it was a very large place that was very full of hard things like rocks, like the yellow stone. And he finally got to the really big entryway with a portcullis. A portcullis is a metal gate, but it was all the way withdrawn, so he could walk right in, but he could still see the spikes hanging down. And it was this big entrance where there was all of these candelabras and a big table and some huge chairs. So he really couldn't see that much. But the table was well over his head. It was definitely not made for humans. And the chair top, he couldn't even crawl in because it was over his head too. He would have had to climb it like a mountain. And so he said, this is definitely a place for giants. I don't know if it's a castle, and I don't know if the giants are dead, but it's definitely built for giants. So he decided to try to call out, and then he said, hello again, and he goes, hello, 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 hello. And he wandered all over that castle trying to find things. It was very hard because it was dark. There's no windows because of the pyramid with no windows. And he went up as far as the bedrooms, and he went as low as far as the dungeons. And he found several scary things down there. Places, cells that were empty but had handcuffs in them on the walls. They're called manacles. And they were empty. But every once in a while he could hear the wind blowing through those. He did find a couple skeletons of people that had died down there, and they just were totally forgotten about. Finally went upstairs, and he said, well, this place, there's no one here. He found the kitchen, and all he could find there was food and rats that had eaten it all through the years. A lot of dead rats that had eaten all the leftover food and just starved. He knew that even though it was probably a pretty safe place, he did not want to sleep here. So he decided this was the castle his grandpa told him about, and which meant that he was almost, or at least he's going the right direction to find the canyon. So he left the castle, although he found a church inside the castle with a bunch of pews and an altar and a pulpit and a stage, and so he was a little confused why that was. Maybe the giant that lived there was also a judge, maybe. But